Mitchell is in the house. He's officially in the building and has arrived. And we are happy
and
to see
in the hot seat.
In the hot seat, yeah. Is it hot over there? I know Chris has the fan on usually. I shut it off when I come in because.
Yeah, you guys have sometimes blast me with the space heater.
Well, I have. I'm on blood thinners, so.
Oh, is that
yeah?
what's
I'm
going
always
on?
freezing, you know, and
okay.
he's like always.
That's your excuse.
He'd
Okay,
have the
it's
windows
blood thinners.
open if he could, but it's not quite that warm yet. So how you doing?
I'm very well. It's busy. Sorry I was a little late. I got pulled into a couple of things, but and luckily I didn't get caught on the bridge, and so here I am.
Okay. Sad news out of the zoo yesterday. Gracie passing the bison, 19-year-old bison. I love those bison.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a sad thing, but look,
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, that exhibit's one of the more prominent ones at the zoo, and obviously, you know, the zoo does a really good job in you know, managing things like that. When animals die, they're very professional and they handle it well. But it's always a sad thing when one of our animals passes.
I used to work, as you know, part-time over at the zoo in the gift store on Saturdays, and part of my great enjoyment was watching the bison run around in that field.
Yeah,
right out the back window there. And I mean, we're fortunate in that we have that kind of thing for kids.
You didn't sing "Give Me a Home with a
Buffalo
Roam."
No, I didn't think to do that.
Yeah.
Now maybe I'll go do that over Gracie's remains.
Yeah. No, it's a sad thing, but that is a very successful exhibit, and I think it'll continue to be. And but as I said, I think the zoo manages under Keith Lovett's leadership does a really good job managing those events.
So do we go find a new bison? How do we handle this?
I don't know how many bison they have on exhibit right now, Barry.
I thought there were two, and an indication that I saw after that, I thought there were three. Yeah, but yeah. I thought there were two. I don't know. I only saw two at a time, but
yeah.
So two eyes, two bison.
Yeah. What can I say? We can get you that answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. John will have that answer within seconds.
Yeah,
I know he will. Yeah. All right. It's a big night for education in the city of New Bedford.
Indeed. Yeah.
So what's going to happen? How's this going to work? How does it play out?
Tell me who you're going to vote for, Mayor. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, no, I haven't gotten there yet, but I was going to ask
you that.
Question. That's the next question. Yeah. So you're running for re-election?
Yeah. That's good. That's of course the next one too. Yeah. You're getting too predictable. Yeah, it's been a good process. Let me just talk about the process. It's been a very thorough process that started back in the beginning of December. Started really in November when Superintendent Durkin informed the school committee that of her intention to resign effective the end of the school year. And so that started our search process. It was headed up by a very capable screening committee, and we were able to get some 35 candidates to apply for the position. They winnowed it down to 4 finalists from that 35, and over the last couple of weeks, the school committee has done public interviews of each of those 4 candidates using the same battery of questions. And it's been a good process. Been well attended. I think there was one session that wasn't terribly well attended, but the three others were, and I was grateful for that. And we had the last interview on Monday that was with Dr. Anna Riley, who's the superintendent in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. And I think the public got a really good glimpse of the candidates. Interviews aren't everything. Interviews are obviously very important. They're not everything, but so we've taken pains to look at their backgrounds by talking to people with whom they've worked over the years, looking at their records in their districts in terms of test scores and graduation rates and whatnot. And so this has been a very thorough vetting process, and it'll culminate tonight in a vote by the school committee.
So how does this play out? I mean, are they all given a chance to address the jury before the vote happens? Do we pick rocks?
They've said their piece.
They've all said their piece. So it's simply going to be just vote?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay, so this should be over quickly then? Should be a fairly quick process?
Yeah. Yeah. If no one candidate gets a majority of votes, then we'll go to a second ballot. And then until somebody has,
you can do like on Survivor, like a fire making contest or something. You know,
this is a tiebreaker.
Yeah,
yeah, we could do that. You know, they could arm wrestle or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, out of the four, do you have one? You don't have to tell me who, but I mean, anybody in mind that you at this point, or are you still kicking it around?
Yeah, we're still doing, our homework on this, and it's not to say that I'm waiting to the last.
I mean, you're the
minute,
guy that shops on Christmas Eve, so I couldn't even imagine that you'd have your mind made up yet.
There's
right?
That's a fair point. No, I mean, I am leaning in one particular direction. I'd rather not say until I declare my vote tonight. I don't want to sound coy about it, but obviously after the vote is taken, there will be a lot. There will be a lot to discuss about the rationale for not just my vote, but each school committee member's vote.
Again, you don't have to identify who, but is there anybody that you can say right now that you've absolutely ruled out of the four?
I wouldn't say that either. No.
Well, again, you don't have to tell me who, but I mean, is there somebody out of the four that you're like, no way, I just couldn't vote with that person?
No, I think we had good finalists.
All four are.
We had a very good process. We took
huh?
real pains to make this a good process, a thorough process. We actively recruited, in a variety of ways. We hired a search firm to do some recruiting. I certainly called up folks that might be able to generate interest in the position among sitting superintendents, especially in Massachusetts, and. We ended up with, among the finalists, we ended up with 3 sitting superintendents. So I think those efforts paid off. We have good candidates to pick from, and we'll make our decision tonight, Barry.
So once a decision is made, then the negotiating process begins, right?
Yeah, it does. It's not. I don't anticipate that it would be a long negotiation because we posted the salary range that's out there. It's these superintendent contracts to a degree are fairly I don't want to say cookie cutter, but they're fairly standardized. So there isn't a whole a huge range of possibilities in terms of how many vacation days someone gets or how many bereavement days get somebody. All those things can get worked out.
How many vacation days do they get?
Geez, I don't. Well. I mean, it varies by contract. In the case of Dr. Durkin, I'm not sure offhand. I could. It's another answer that I could. Now that you've stumped me, I could go.
Stump the mayor.
I would say it's either 4 or 5 weeks, and so 20 or 25 days, roughly. Yeah.
All right. So the new person should be able to begin right away, or June 1st?
No, it would be officially July 1st, the start of the new fiscal year. But in reality, the person starts working right away, not full time as the superintendent, but rolling up his or her sleeves and getting to know people here, starting the planning, getting a sense of the district, forming a 100-day plan. Taking a look at existing plans, and actually all the candidates spoke about that, and I think they all said, yeah, the plans are good. They're solid plans, so we're probably not going to see a big difference in the plans themselves, the school district plan, accelerated improvement plan, or any of the individual plans for certain of the schools. We'll certainly see with the new superintendent a change in the approach to executing the plans and how that's done for sure. So, but that will play itself out over the next several months and then beginning into the next school year.
Has Dr. Durkin committed to staying right through the end of the fiscal year, or she got sick time saved up and all that kind of stuff and going to cash it in early? Do you know how that's going to work?
I haven't talked to her about cashing in sick time, but and I don't know whether that's doable anyway, but no. Yeah, but I certainly expect for her to be here through it right up until June 30th, or thereabouts, right? The high school graduation is like the last big public event for the school system in the fiscal year, which is right around June 10th or so, thereabouts.
Okay. Something I noticed.
I think it's June 8th this year. So
I meant to ask you about something a few weeks back, and it slipped my mind. And then you weren't here; you were off in Washington. Then we had snow and everything else.
I was avoiding you.
You were avoiding me. That was it, because you knew I was going to ask you this. But during your state of the city, which we carried live and everything else, you paid great homage to the progress made in the school department and all kinds of stuff. You never once mentioned her by name or said, congratulations or thank you for your years of service or whatever. Was that intentional?
No. I mean, there are a lot of people that I could single out for great efforts, and I try in that speech to do some of that. The trap with those speeches is, and lots of mayors and even governors fall into this, is that you could spend a full hour just saying, and so-and-so did such a great job on X, Y, and Z. Everybody, let's give them a round of applause. Right. Nobody wants to listen to a speech that is just a litany of shout-outs. I try to weave them in into the text of the speech so that I'm giving credit where it's due, but I'm not. I'm trying to make a point with those speeches, or several points, and those points can get lost if you have just incessant, occasions to stand up and applaud. I've singled her out in other speeches, including the State of the City speeches in previous years.
I noticed it because, I get paid to notice stuff like that, but and then ask you about it. But I mean, I noticed it because of the fact that she is leaving. I would have thought that I would have heard,
she's still going to be
coming, and we'll see you later.
She's still going to be around for a few months, so it's not like she's heading out the door tomorrow.
All right, City Council and the capital improvement program that we've been talking about quite a bit here, and wanting to bond for road repairs above and beyond what the state gives us for Chapter 90 money and all of this kind of stuff. Now it seems the council president has a change of heart on all of this. Councilor Morad proposed that the committee, what committee was it? Finance? I think it was Finance Committee. Yeah, Finance Committee.
Yeah, there were two meetings last night. One was the Finance Committee meeting, and one was the Ordinance Committee meeting. And there was significant activity in both. So in the Finance Committee meeting, the committee decided to table the capital improvement program projects.
It's covered a lot of different areas, including road repairs.
So road repairs, upgrades, long overdue upgrades to the library, long overdue upgrades to New Bedford High School, work at West Beach, some IT work in City Hall to upgrade servers, which is all new elevator in City Hall. So these are all in the mix, and I think it's, in general, I'm glad that the council has come around to the idea that we need to put money into roadways. And it was something that I proposed last year. The council supported it. Not everybody did. Now I think there's a real desire to do that, so that's good. I think the trick with roadways, there are a couple things. One is, there has to be as we've started to do, a sustainable commitment to road improvement. So that hasn't existed in the city in a while, and we've seen what's happened to the condition of our roadways. Like how much we can afford has to be, each year has to be carefully considered. So we don't want a one-time thing of, say, pick a number, $10 million, if we could afford to do that, so that we patch all the things that need to be patched and everybody's happy. Roads deteriorate over time, and you have to be able to keep up and invest more along the way, steadily, reliably. And so what we're trying to do, what I believe we have to do, is to maintain the program that we have started, whether it's $1 million or 1.2 million. I'm not sure what the magic number is, but it has to be. We don't want to run into a problem in a couple of years where we say, well, we've spent enough money on roads, let's go back and fix the roof on this building and all these buildings because we're leaking. They're all leaking, and we hadn't dealt with those roofs a few years earlier. We've got to maintain all these things. We have to maintain buildings along the way. We have to, make sure the roads are in proper order. And so there's some number that we can and should devote to roads every year, and that's what we're committed to doing. So it's a long way of saying I'm with the council in general. What that number is remains to be seen. As far as the buildings and other things go, yeah, there are things that you have to, you have to invest in, and or else they'll fall apart.
But your CIP plan had $6.1 million in it, and she wants to divert $1.5 million away from other projects, including, as we mentioned, maybe the elevator, the zoo, the West Beach House that we've talked about here, all the way from $300,000 down to zero to defund it. Fleet improvement, down to defund that completely. Cutting considerably from the IT, library, school grounds. Cutting considerably there. So it was my understanding that the council was on board with the bonding for the road improvements that you had put forward. Had they not voted on that at one point?
Last year.
Okay.
So this is an annual exercise. So every year we have a 5-year capital plan, and every year the city council approves a loan authorization of some amount, which in the last few years...
I thought that the plan that you presented was a 5-year plan.
It's a 5-year plan, but they authorize funding of the plan in 1-year increments. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought it was a bulk 5-year plan. We're going to borrow so much each year for 5 years and do the roads.
So just for clarity's sake, so the city has a capital improvement program,
which is a wish list.
Yeah, but it's not so much it's a carefully thought out maintenance plan of putting roofs on buildings, fixing roads, and doing appropriate repairs. The city has 96 buildings, right? So there's a lot to maintain, and then it's over 300 miles of roadways. So we have a capital plan that runs 5 years long, and every year, that includes all those projects, and every year, we authorize the next year's funding of that plan. So what we're doing with roadways is over the next 5 years, the plan has been, we're going to do $1 million to roadways each of those years. So this year I proposed, as I did last year, $1 million for roads. And what the council is saying is, that's not enough. And grant you, I in an ideal world, I'd say, yeah, absolutely, that's not enough. But the question becomes, the more you put in the roads, the more you have to start worrying about leaky roofs. And so we're just trying to establish a balance there. I had my bi-weekly meeting with Council President Morad this morning, and we talked a lot about this. I think there's probably some room for compromise, and we'll seek to do that, working through her and the other councilors.
Was this political, do you think?
No, I don't. Political in the sense that it's an attempt to favor a particular interest in the city. I don't. No, I think there's.
Well, 90% of our phone calls every Wednesday are about potholes and road repairs and county street.
Political as in reacting to that.
Well, yeah. I mean, is this?
No, I get the calls too, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, is the council acting politically here? I mean, taking money away from necessary projects in order to win political favor.
I think the people need to understand. Everybody needs to understand that a couple of things. The roads in our city have not been invested in appropriately over time. And that's, I don't want to cast stones and blame, but I think we relied too much on the state to do that. The state's funding over time has not grown all that much. This is the so-called Chapter 90 program, where we get about a little over $2 million a year in state funding to fix our roads. It's not even close to being enough. So I think there need to be changes to the state formula, which we can talk about for sure. But the city also needs to ante up as well, and so that's why
CIP addresses that need.
It does.
Many of the councilors that are voting now to change this plan were the councilors that in past years were down with the way things were going. They approved CIP plans in the past. That's why I'm asking if it's political. All of a sudden, what was being done before is not acceptable, and we need to do more than what we've pledged.
I think
to
you'll have to ask them that. I mean, everybody gets the pothole calls, and they're not.
Yeah.
I don't mean to sound dismissive of them at all. It's the state of the roads in the city is an issue, but it's one that's been that has been long in developing.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to do is we're not going to make the roads perfect overnight. But we can make them better if we have a sustained investment.
How many roads can you do in a year anyway? I mean, is there?
Well, it's not that much. Yeah. You're talking. I forget the figures on this, Barry, but it's you're with a couple of $1 million, you're not talking more than a mile of roads in a city that has over 300 miles of roads.
Right. So if you add another $1.5 million to roads,
you're still going to get the pothole calls. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've still got time limitations too, because it's going to snow again real soon. Unfortunately,
it is.
It's going to be October again before you know it. You can only do so much of that work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a consideration as well. We're on the cusp of the next construction season.
Right.
Right. And so, how much of any new spending can be absorbed is a real question. I'd like, at some point for the city to have a bigger capital program so that we can fix buildings more readily. We can rebuild some new schools, and that we can rebuild roadways faster. But we're just not there yet financially. And so, all this. These are all things that the city has to do while keeping tax rates down, while continuing to invest in the things that will make the city competitive economically in the long run, the waterfront, the school system, and other things.
What made me wonder about the politics of all of this was in Mike Bonner's article in the Standard Times. The last line, Morad's motion to table the item is a move, she said, to try to ensure the council's voices are heard. And that sounds like a statement to me. So I was just, I realize you can't speak for the counselor, but.
Well, yeah, we've had countless conversations with city councilors on the CIP, and we'll continue to have that. So I don't think there's been a communication breakdown there. We've worked very hard to using not just the mayor's office, but also department heads to explain to the council why the proposals are necessary.
So does there have to be a joint agreement between the council and the mayor's office before the CIP can proceed?
Well, like any
other
piece of
right?
any other piece of legislation, it has to be passed by the city council. In the case of a loan order, it actually requires an 8-3 vote. It requires a supermajority,
right?
Which does itself make things a little more difficult sometimes to get to yes, right? Because you're expected to achieve something close to unanimity, and that's often difficult,
especially when you have 4 mayoral candidates sitting in the council.
Well, there's that too, right? So and then it has to be signed by me. Whatever's authorized, I don't have to. We can borrow up to that amount. So if the council comes back and says, we want you to, you're authorized to build, a new.
Bathhouse on the south.
Yeah. I don't necessarily have to spend that money.
Okay.
So this will be a conversation that we'll have. So the other thing that happened last night was in the ordinance committee, and they got a lot done. I really want to just thank the councilors for getting on board on the items there. They passed the amendments to the problem property ordinance, which will lower the threshold for a property to become designated a problem property. And as we've explained before, when a problem becomes a problem property, the cost of police responses shift onto the landlord. So this will help us deal with the real problem landlords in the city, of whom there are just a handful, but they own a lot of property. There was another provision in there that said for non-owner occupied property, you have to have the name of the property owner displayed in a common area of the house. That will help us track down who's responsible for the property. And then there was another provision that contracted the time in which a property owner has to clean up his or her property. If you have a property that's a mess these days, the city will order you to clean it up, but the property owner has 14 days after he or she receives notice of the order, which can take a long time. And so now it's gone from 14 days down to 3 days. So this will speed things up. So we'll get properties cleaned up much faster that way, which is good.
It's the damnedest thing. Whenever we have this conversation on the program, landlords, good landlords, who've owned property forever, never had a problem with them at all, they get scared. For some reason, they feel as though they're going to be targeted and there's going to be some kind of enforcement effort against them. And I don't get that. I try to explain to folks that what we're talking here about is problem landlords, people who don't care about their property. They're unscrupulous. A lot of times they don't even live in the city. and they allow anything to occur on their properties. These are the folks that...
Yeah, in fact, none of them live in the city. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. These are the folks that we talk about, because I support cracking down on absentee landlords and people who allow their property to be used for nefarious reasons. So, I mean, what do you say to these guys who are decent homeowners that have nice properties, they maintain them, they have nice tenants and everything else, that somehow or another feel threatened by this?
Yeah, the ones who feel threatened are not the ones who live on, let's say, the first floor of a tenement. In other words, we're almost always talking about non-owner occupied property, and we don't have major problems with landlords who own 2 or 3 properties around the city. If they own a 3-decker somewhere and it's or wherever, but they live in, if the owner lives in the city or lives in Greater New Bedford, it's usually not a problem. The problem is with the landlords who own dozens and dozens of properties. We have 1 or 2 that own 100 properties around the city. You just can't manage all of them effectively, and I do question whether they have the capacity to manage properties the way they should be, which is to say, you don't let criminals into the property. If people are acting up, you have to find a way to get rid of them, and you have to work closely with the police. You have to work closely with the city to make sure that there isn't trash all over the place, or there are building code violations or criminal activity. And, we have the same people time and again in housing court, again and again and again, showing up. And these are the major landlords who really don't care about the neighborhoods in which their houses are situated.
No, they're warehouses. They're people warehouses, and it's all about getting the money, Section 8 or whatever other kind of
so
government
sometimes it's Section 8
get.
vouchers. A lot of times it's people without Section 8 vouchers who are coming in from, other cities, and so we've got to maintain order in the neighborhoods. And when we talk about public safety in those neighborhoods, a lot of it stems from who's moving in, and that's my opinion. And it's not the people who are living in owner-occupied property. When the owner's living on the first floor, the owner usually takes care of business. The owner doesn't let just anybody rent the second or third floor. That person makes sure that there's some control over who's in there, and obviously by being there, you can watch the place and make sure that things are squared away. If you walk down, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you walk down any street in the near North End, if you walk down Tallman Street, if you walk down Bullard or Nye or any one of those streets, you can pick out which homes are owner occupied. They are in such better condition than the ones that are not owner occupied. It's uncanny, right? You can just do it. You would have 100% accuracy rate. That one's owned. The owner lives there. The owner doesn't live there, and so forth. And what we're trying to do is create a system in which every owner who occupies or doesn't occupy the building, everybody treats their properties like they would their own home. That's the standard.
Well, if I own a 3-decker or you own a 3-decker, there are certain rules that apply to us, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you own 100 3-deckers, doesn't that put you in a different category? Is that not like a business now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and they should be taxed that way, right? Massachusetts does not allow for that. So if you own 100 triple-deckers, you're running a big business. And Massachusetts does not allow residential property to be treated as rental property as being treated as a business and being taxed that way, but it should.
Yeah, and there should be other fees too for public safety and public services and everything else that would regulate these people and rules. But the state
the tenements that grew up in the textile era in our city were not designed to be managed by one person or one company, right? They were designed to be for families, mostly immigrant families, where you had, as you rarely do these days, the father and mother living on the first floor, grandma on the second, cousin on whatever configuration, right? And that's the way they were managed, and they worked very well that way. With demographic changes in the city, with the influx of some folks who are displaced from Boston and New York and other cities, you have a churning of the population, and you don't have landlords, and this is the big thing, you don't have the landlords actually living in the place. It becomes harder and harder for those neighborhoods to self-regulate, and that's why I think that's primarily the reasons why we have issues around public safety and cleanliness in those neighborhoods, and that's what we've been really battling against over the last few years. So we're sticking with it. I mean, created this task force a few years ago. It's made a big difference, and we've taken some additional measures along the way. The stuff the city council passed last night is going to be helpful, and I'm grateful for their support.
What some of these so-called good landlords tell me that they're afraid of is that if there are increased inspections, for example, in some of these other buildings, that they're going to be subjected to those increased inspections as well, and they're afraid that it's going to cost them a lot of money. That it's going to cost them. Well, you got to upgrade this, you got to upgrade that. This is not acceptable, and so on and so forth.
None of the things that the city council passed last night entails more required inspections at all. So that shouldn't be an issue for them. I think they do make the landlords in the city do make the ones who've had problems with tenants and who've struggled to manage their properties but are doing an honest job of it do have a legitimate gripe in that under Massachusetts law it is very difficult to evict bad tenants, and because the law is so heavily favors tenants' rights over landlords' rights, they have, I think, a legitimate point that there needs to be some kind of rebalancing there. But what I've told them, all landlords, is you have to do more work on the front end. If you are getting, if you know that you're getting a tenant who was kicked out of some other apartment, who's got a criminal record, who doesn't have any references, whose credit scores are lousy, you're sowing the seeds for a really bad problem. And
are you allowed to ask those questions?
You can ask someone. You can do a criminal records check. You can ask for references. Yeah, you can do all those things. Yep.
All right, let me take a break. I can't believe the time already. Let me do a break. We're going to come right back. 508-996-0500. Your calls for the mayor. Stay with us right here on WBSM.
We're number one.
And you're part of that,
number one. Yeah.
You are.
I'm driving your ratings.
That's it. You're helping.
I'm number one.
I'm helping. Yeah, Wednesday at noon, we're number one. That's right. Bunch of calls. We're going to go right to them in half a second, but I wanted to get your reaction. Deepwater Wind has picked 3 sites. If it is awarded the contract, where they would like to manufacture the pieces and all of that stuff that would go into their windmills. And New Bedford, Fall River, and Somerset are the 3 top choices there. So what do we do from this point? How do we lobby them?
I'm not going to sound like the mayor here, Barry. I think it's unlikely that it's going to be in New Bedford just because those manufacturing sites require a ton of land, lots and lots of land. So, we've seen these foundation manufacturing sites in Europe that, have anywhere between 40 and 100 acres of land. We don't have that available on the waterfront. I think of all the places that were named, it's probably Brayton Point is probably the most likely one. So people might say, well, gee, Mayor, why aren't you fighting for those jobs? Well, for these foundation manufacturing plants, you're not talking that many jobs per acre. So we have only so many acres in the city. We try to have employers that have a great deal of employment density, right? So if you have, what would you rather have? A manufacturer of foundations on 100 acres of land that employs only 60 people, or would you like to have more smaller businesses in that same footprint that employ, pick a number, a couple thousand people? You'd say, well, of course we want more jobs. So I think that the area where people's expectations around offshore wind have to be understood in this way. New Bedford is going to have a lot of action when it comes to marshaling offshore wind projects, or in other words, the staging the projects down in the South Terminal area, and operations and maintenance, which is another really good area for jobs, and lots of related economic activity in the years ahead. Manufacturing big windmill components is going to be tough just because they require so much land. So we're definitely having those conversations, but if we don't get it, I certainly would like to see Fall River or Somerset.
Well, Fall River's got less land than we've got, so it's more likely Somerset.
But if at the Hess site on the Taunton River,
right,
that there's actually a fair amount of land available there.
Yeah,
not nearly as much. What's that?
Isn't that the train depot?
No, there's room for a manufacturer there.
Okay.
Brain Point's is a bigger site. Brain Point's a sizable place, and you could put a factory there. And
so would these things come down 195, or would they?
No, God, they're too big.
No,
it's all transported by water. Yeah.
All right, 508-996-0500. We're going to try to rifle through as many of these as we can. You're up first on WBSM with the mayor. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. The soccer field where Joseph Camara field was dedicated, the framework for the goalie has been destroyed. And I have pictures of it. And if I had your number, sir, I would have sent them to you. So that needs to be taken care of.
All right, so right on Orchard Street, Al.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
All right, Al.
On Orchard Street.
All right, appreciate it, Al. Let's go to the next one. You're next on WBSM. Good afternoon.
Hi, Barry. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Mr. Mayor, I only have one question, and I'm going to hang up and listen to your answer.
Yep.
I'm just curious. I mean, they say we don't have money to fix the streets and stuff. We pay heavy excise tax bills. I can't speak for everybody else, but mine's is like $500 a year. Could you tell me where that money goes to?
Yeah, excise tax money goes into the general fund, like everything else. And, we've talked about financing before, municipal financing, and the struggles that we have as a city are over things like pensions and health care and charter school costs. Those are the ones that are, putting the greatest pressure on our budgets, and to the exclusion of things like roads and fixing roofs and stuff. So we're doing a good job managing it. It just isn't as easy as it should be.
All right, 508-996-0500. You're next with the mayor. Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Barry, I wanted you, first of all, for you to be the first from the great class of 76 to know that you are speaking to a multi-millionaire. I'll be collecting my delivery today, and I wanted the mayor to know as well that we will have the first multi-millionaire in New Bedford.
Wow. Perfect. Congratulations. Yeah, so what are you going to do? You going to fix some roads with it?
I'm going to do a lot of things. I want to talk a lot with the city council and the mayor about different things, and maybe clear up a lot of things.
Good.
All right, have you got a, because I'm really short on time, have you got a question for the mayor?
You can take other calls. I'll talk to you later on, Barry.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think that's going to do it for the call portion. Let me take a real quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. I can't believe how quickly the hour goes sometimes when we get engrossed in conversation.
Yeah,
here.
yeah, it's good.
And things are happening, and summer's coming. Spring is here.
Not fast enough, Barry.
Yeah.
But no, it's good. You know, we're turning the corner. I assure you on the bad weather. No, it's we're looking forward to it. You know, there will be, once we get into April, there'll be people will start to see a great deal of construction going on, including on roads in the city, and you know, there's a number of interesting initiatives that will emerge in the next few months in the city that we look forward to.
So, have you ordered the plows taken off of the trucks yet?
Not yet. That would jinx us.
That definitely
we'd get a blizzard the next day. Yeah.
So we wait till July 4th on that one, right?
Yeah, as long as we get. The thing that jinxes us the most, has jinxed me in previous years, is telling DPI, once you pull all the sand barrels in, it's too late, and then sure enough it snows. So I stopped doing that.
All right, Mayor, appreciate you coming in. Midweek with the Mayor.
Thanks, Barry.
Always a pleasure having you guys here. And we're going to take a break for the news. We've got ABC News, and then Tim's got the local stuff, and we're going to come back on the other side with some interesting things that are going on around the area and around the country. So hopefully we'll have your participation in all of that. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this on WBSM.